and the difficult problems with property tax reassessments in the state of Georgia. We've been looking at both what can be done statutorily immediately and what can also be done in terms of enabling legislation. What HB 233 does is what I would call Plan B, which is what we believe that we could do statutorily should H.R. 1 fail to pass. And we've had extensive discussions with not only Legislative Counsel but with other lawyers, and also, I've been able to actually do something rare and pull out the legal books myself and do a lot of research myself. And we believe, after this extensive discussions with various lawyers, that HB 233, as you have before you, is it has the best chance of meeting the constitutional concerns folks may have regarding uniformity. And I think it's very important for you to understand what uniformity actually says in the Constitution, which is that it must be uniform as to a class of taxpayers, and that's what we've tried to do. And keep in mind that without H.R. 1, we don't have the flexibility to do a lot of the various balancing issues we have between commercial and residential property. We cannot, for instance, differentiate between commercial and residential property in terms of a cap of 3 or 4%, like we had proposed to go to the floor on H.R. 1. We cannot also differentiate between newer property owners and older property owners. We have those kind of restraints. We have also put it in here for only a limited period of time. We felt it was important while we try to work out the long-term issues with H.R. 1 and passing a constitutional amendment, which hopefully will pass, and this bill will not be necessary. But we felt that should the folks lock down, there be intransigence, that we ought to do something immediately, particularly during these difficult economic times. We felt it was very important for property owners to have a certain degree of certainty when it comes to their local governments, in terms of making sure that should any level of government, local, state, or federal, during these difficult times, if they want to raise additional revenue, should have to do so through the front door. And therefore, we have come up with HB 233, which I believe is a tight piece of legislation, which, as I've stated through my extensive discussion with lawyers, and I have grown to dislike lawyers and understand why other people don't like them after having dealt with this issue, we believe that we do have something that does meet constitutional scrutiny and will also provide some real short-term protection should H.R. 1 not pass. What it simply does is it imposes a 3% cap on all reassessments in the state of Georgia, effective July 1st of this year, and will continue for 2 years. The only times in which that 3% can be raised or lifted is if the property if there are improvements to the property, or if the property is rezoned by the owner of the property and is used for the rezoning purposes, for the purpose covered by the rezoning. Those are the only exceptions allowed during this short time period. It is our hope, like I said, that we will be able to come together as we did last year on the previous attempts to cap property tax reassessments and pass H.R. 1 and have a long-term solution. But if we cannot, we believe that this will provide at least a good, sound, short-term protection for the people of Georgia as they go through this difficult economic times. Mr. Chairman, that's it.
Yield questions of
Yes,
members
sir.
of the committee. Chair recognizes number 25. That is Chairman Stevens.
Can do that again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry.
This doesn't affect the floating homesteads at all.
No, it doesn't.
Good.
And let me also add, I think it's important, and I've mentioned it to the subcommittee, but I think it's important for those of you who weren't on it. This also does not in any way limit our ability to give added additional protections to homeowners through any kind of homestead protection we want to implement either this year or next year, through whether it be floating homesteads in those areas that don't have them, or whether it be simply increasing the homestead in your area, or a myriad of other things. The one problem, however, and this is why H.R. 1 is so very important to pass, is that H.R. 1 guarantees that those floating homesteads that you just mentioned are constitutional. There are folks out there who have indicated that they do intend to attack the constitutionality of those floating homesteads. And one thing H.R. 1 does is it settles that issue once and for all.
Is there anything, if I may follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Is there anything in this bill at all that prohibits any taxing authority from raising revenue?
No, it does not, and I think that's a very important thing. All it does, and I think it's very important, particularly during difficult economic times, is it requires folks to go through the front door, local governments go through the front door if they want to raise additional revenue. It does not allow them to do it through the back door. And as we all face, and I sit on appropriations, I'm vice chair for appropriations, we're having to struggle with just that issue because we know that the people of Georgia are looking to us to make sure that we cut our spending before we ever ask for another nickel from them during difficult economic times. That's the kind of front door scrutiny that we ought to also make sure is folks are facing on the local level.
Chairman Rice. 14, is that Representative Flood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my friend from Buckhead, curious as to the reason and rationale for going forward with HB 233 so quickly, and what impact that might have if HR 1, by the purview of this body or by the purview of the voters, failed to pass. What would be the impact? If
HR 1 passes this House, I do not think, and passes the General Assembly, I do not think that HB 233 is necessarily necessary. I do think, and we can begin to start to look at enabling legislation, which the subcommittee and I have already had one hearing on in terms of enabling legislation for HR 1. And it is our intention to continue with that effort, and I do encourage folks who have thoughts regarding the enabling legislation to come to me. One of the things that actually has kind of frustrated me about that is we try to show exactly what HR 1 is going to do and how it's going to work. We were hoping that would open the dialogue more for more discussions with some local governments. Unfortunately, their response to us so far has been somewhat deafening silence, and also when we said, well, we have certain statutory remedies as well, was, well, if you do it, we'll sue you. I don't think that that's the kind of response that the citizens of Georgia really want to hear from any level of government on this issue or any other taxation or revenue issue. I think they want to see us work together.
Further inquiry.
Please.
If this passes and property assessments are frozen for 2 years, and HR 1 caps are not passed, HR 1 does not pass. Mm-hmm. In subsequent years, beyond 2012, 2011, would taxpayers expect, or could they expect, a tax increase?
2011, our goal is to pass HR 1.
But I'm just supposing that HR 1 does not pass. That's the scenario I'm looking at.
Well, it's kind of up to you as to whether it passes.
Well, not just to me; it's up to the voters as well.
I realize that, but I am confident that if it's placed into the hands of the voters, they will pass it. I've done a pretty good survey around the country on how caps on reassessments have been taken by voters when they've been given an opportunity to vote on it, and they have overwhelmingly voted for such caps. So I have every confidence in the world that if we do the right thing and we let the voters decide on this issue, the voters will approve those caps.
Again,
I'm not sure he ever answered your question.
The
problem is, quite frankly, I question the validity of the spin, not the spin. The question whether or not that will ever happen, because I think that HR 1, if it gets to the voters, will pass. If HR 1 does not pass, and when this was in effect, it will cease to exist by its own accord on July 1st, by June 30th, 2011. Let me back up. I didn't mean to say that you were spinning. I apologize for that. That didn't come out the way I meant it. I just simply don't believe that your scenario will actually take place. I think the voters will vote for HR 1.
But I didn't ask that question.
Yeah.
My
You asked me what happens if it doesn't.
Right.
If it doesn't pass, and if we had this on the books and it doesn't pass on June 30th, 2011, it ceases.
I understand that. But what is the impact? The
impact, if it does not pass, if HR 1 does not pass,
right,
in the long run, the impact is we will continue with a system that our constituents inherently believe to be unfair, and that is we will continue to have a system in which we We have out-of-control reassessments and backdoor tax increases. That's what will continue. And you will see voters continue to be frustrated with their elected officials' inability to address the problem and come up with a fair system for having property taxes. That's what I believe will happen.
Now, Representative, I know you went to Davidson and you're very eloquent, but you never answered my question.
Okay, let me ask it again, and I'll make sure I can answer.
Well, I think the question was, what would be the impact on property owners if H.R. 1 does not pass and HB 233 were to pass? Does that mean that they would, in fact, see a property tax increase?
No.
In 2011?
No.
I understand that you mentioned there are a lot of places that have passed property tax caps. There are a lot of places that have also tried to repeal those caps, including my own state of South Carolina right now.
South Carolina, I beg to differ, but go ahead.
South Carolina has a cap that is under very serious scrutiny right now as to the validity and whether or not it will continue. And there are other states that are having problems with caps. And so even though the voters have, in fact, many cases voted for it, there have been repercussions that were unforeseen, and I'm just trying to understand what would happen if H.R. 1 were not to pass, and what would be the impact of HB 233.
Well, I don't believe that it will result in property tax increases. And the difficulties faced with South Carolina, the voters like the caps in South Carolina. Some of the local governments don't, and there has been some difficulty when it comes to how it's been applied. And we have, and we are working on dealing with those unintended consequences. For instance, the chief problem that has come about with South Carolina, since you raised it, there are two problems with South Carolina. One is that what they did was they did put a cap across the board, but they also took all property taxes off of residential and tried to replace it purely with a sales tax system. And as a result, when sales taxes dove down, the only avenue that local governments had in terms of raising revenue was raising the millage rate, which was exclusively on commercial property. That shows how dangerous it is to have property instead of property taxes across the board, to have property taxes on one group or
Representative
another.
Lindsey, I hate to interrupt you, but if I were the judge and somebody made a relevance objection, I'd have to sustain it. I've got several other questions here. I think you've tried three times to answer his question. Can you wrap it up on this one?
To wrap it up, I don't believe that folks in South Carolina are going to repeal their cap on reassessment. That's bottom line.
Okay. Thank you.
And we got enough to worry about in Georgia, I think. Number 11, is that Representative Knight?
Two things, Representative Lindsey. One, I know we elaborated in subcommittee regarding, there was a question with school boards. I'd like you to repeat again for everyone that there is no cap on what they can do. They have some local control there to do that.
Thank you. And they do have local control. All they have to do is call, the school board itself can call for a referendum and lift any caps, millage caps that may be imposed.
And then second, just to, I guess, not to beat a dead horse, but in reference to the question we just heard, if this were to pass and H.R. 1 were not to pass, in 2 years this would go away and we'd go back to the current system. Is that right?
That's right.
And under the current system, if valuations go up, the millage rate is supposed to go back down, and then it would be up to the local governments to raise that millage rate if they so chose. Is that right?
That's how it works in theory, unfortunately. It's still resulted in backdoor tax increases.
But that's the current law.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They can actually raise the millage rates tomorrow if this passes.
Yes, sir.
29, who's that? Representative May.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Lindsey, I'm trying to present this in a way that you can answer Representative Flood's question. With all due respect, is it not true that when this expires, there would not be a tax increase as long as the county, when it raised the assessed value of the home, rolled the millage rate back to the rollback rate?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Chairman Roberts? That doesn't work. Which one you?
To cut me off, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, it's worked up to now, but
What is that? That's not working. Well, I'd like to make a motion. No. Representative Lindsay, is it not true that there has been a lot of discussion with legal counsel and all about whether this is constitutional or not, and several members have talked to them about it, and all of them have gotten the same response, and that is that they do believe that it is constitutional?
We believe that after having closely examined it, that what we have here has the best chance of surviving constitutional scrutiny compared to doing what we discussed yesterday in terms of what we could do with enabling legislation on H.R. 1, which would give us broad discretion. We could do a lot more if H.R. 1 passes, but we believe that this short-term limited cap with limited ability to release the cap has the best chance of surviving any kind of constitutional challenge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Flood?
You already called on me.
I saw it blinking again. Did you have another question?
No, sir, I didn't.
Okay. 14, is that?
That's still on.
That's off? I don't see any more questions, or do I? I'm sorry. Which one? 17. My apologies. Chairman Rice.
I'm sorry, I was here a few minutes late, Mr. Lindsay, so I didn't hear your opening comments. Obviously, this is an extremely vast change from yesterday's subcommittee bill. And you probably covered that in your opening comment, but if you'll just give me a moment to ask you about the commercial side.
Yeah.
You did a lot of work on that to come up with a formula by which that would be fairly evaluated and assessed. And I just wanted to know how you were going to accommodate that in the course of this bill.
Well, within the course, this bill is what I call Plan B. And that is if H.R. 1 fails to receive the 120 votes that's required. This is Plan B to move forward immediately with what we can do in a limited way statutorily. We are continuing to work on Plan A, which will include enabling legislation as part of H.R. 1.
But if this goes into effect, then the commercial people will be treated exactly the same.
That's right. But constitutionally, we have to treat all property the same. We can't distinguish between. We can't even come up with a different percentage of cap without a constitutional amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Black.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. First, let me apologize to you for missing the subcommittee meeting on this. I had the last notice I had, the subcommittee was going to meet at 3, and this meeting was going to be at 2, and I had a conflict and thought I could work it out. I missed the meeting I wanted to be at, but at any rate, back to the situation we're faced with here. How are your plans to do with some of the concerns that I've heard from people about their fear of H.R. 1 and not having the enabling legislation to look at it at the time they vote on that? Are you going to try to put something together like what we talked about before you move on H.R. 1?
Yes, sir.
Good.
I think that we've heard from a number of folks like yourself and others that want to see the complete picture, and I think that we should be able to provide that to you.
Good. Appreciate you.
And I think we can.
I'm reluctant to take questions from people that just came in, but Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize to the author of the bill and the committee. We were in a meeting with Chairman Harbin on the appropriations, and that's what delayed me. Representative Lindsay, very concise here. We weren't able to get, and I know you were interested in this, to look at a statutory change to sort of require the local governments to bring assessments in line. That's just more than we can get at given the time constraints we're under, because I fear the cap, which will result in them having to do it through millage rate. If someone is already over-assessed, and I know this bill doesn't say anything about decrease, I would just like us also to be looking at some strengthening statutory. Just ask the question. I'd like for us to be able to pass a law to make it easier for folks to get their assessment in line for those that are over assessed. Are we able to do that as this moves forward? If this changes in the Senate, is that something you could work on as it moves forward?
It's also a problem. It's an enormous problem. You have discussed it extensively. What we have, and I've never said that this is the only answer. And if we pass this, we're in nirvana. There are a lot of issues that we have to take up, and I look forward to working with those with you. The one thing I will say is that this does make a specific statement that it does in no way limits the ability to take the assessment down.
You will let us all know when you have that Nirvana bill that you just referred to.
You've been here longer than I have. And
I kind of like to know ahead of time, if you don't mind.
Let me know.
Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Lindsay, in regards to the constitutionality,
yes, sir.
You used the term in answering a question a few minutes ago in regards to legal counsel. You used the term "we." Does that include legislative counsel, and if so, did they issue a written opinion?
There is no written opinion, no, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But we have been consulting with. When I say we, it does include legislative counsel, and we believe that this was the best chance to survive any kind of constitutional challenge.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, please.
Did we ask for a written opinion?
No.
Okay.
Didn't feel it was necessary.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't see any other questions. Any member of the committee wish to be heard on the bill? I don't see that. What's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion by Chairman Roberts, do pass. I didn't see who the second. Mr. May, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion do pass, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Nay.
I think the ayes clearly have it, but in an abundance of caution, all aye, raise your right hand, please. Okay, nay, like sign. 14 to 4, if there's anybody auditing. Thank you. All right, we're going to go, thank you, committee. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay.
When you get first readers, if you could bring me up for now.
We about had it with you. The chair recognizes the other Davidson graduate here, Representative Flood. Tell us about House Bill 269, if you wish to do that from your, is it 14?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring for the committee's attention and consideration House Bill 269. House Bill 269 simply allows for a taxpayer who is providing care to a family member who is an elderly person who is over 62 years of age and has qualifying caregiving expenses, including personal care, attendance services, adult daycare, respite services, and who would be directly related to a senior citizen, to allow for the amount of that expense for care be used as a credit against their taxable income, taxable state income. Just as a couple of points, the credit would be no greater than the tax liability for that given year. There would be no carry forward, and the credit would not be allowed for prior year liability.
Okay, seems like a pretty reason. Any questions for the author on the first reader? Representative Flood, we're going to assign that to our income tax subcommittee, and hopefully they'll arrange a hearing for you at the earliest convenience to you. That would be Chairman Mills, Alan Peake, or David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen could do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else here for first readers that has an urgent need to go right away? Has other obligations? Do you have something else?
I have House Bill 270.
Oh, I'm sorry. Golly. If it was a snake, it would have bit me. You recognize, please, House Bill 270.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This bill does one simple thing. It allows for a taxpayer who is a non-custodial parent who provides care for their children to be able to take a $3,000 tax exemption against their Georgia tax liability. It provides the same provision to a non-custodial parent who is providing care as it does for the custodial parent who's providing care to their child.
I see a question. Would the gentleman yield to a question?
Yes.
Is that Chairman Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't.
No, I'm not speaking.
I'm sorry. It's not there's no fiscal note with this either one of these. Have you requested those yet?
They have been requested.
Okay,
yes, sir.
thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll assign that also to our Income Tax Subcommittee. Same chairs, maybe they can hear them together. Thank you, Representative Flood, for
Thank you,
those
Mr. Chair.
readings. Is there anyone else here for first reader that has an urgent need to go right away? Otherwise, I'll just get the order of the list I have here. Okay. Representative Stevens, would you tell us about House Bill 261, please, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, House Bill 261 is a very strong stimulus bill that's supposed to hopefully get people off the sideline and into a single-family house. All this bill does is eliminate some of the inventory, huge amounts of inventory, that we've got backed up in our state and causing a large problem with our revenues, our state revenues. Specifically what it does is for any single-family structure, new or previously owned, with properties in the middle from $40,000 to $300,000, within the first 6 months of signature of the governor to become law, the property, there will be an income tax credit of 1.2%, which could be as much as $4,000. It's a narrow window, so the following 6 months that drops in half. The idea being to get people off the fence if they're going to buy a house and buy one soon. This tax credit for income tax credit can be carried forward in succeeding years until it is used up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any questions? I don't see any. We'll assign that to our Income Tax Subcommittee. That would be Chairs Mills, Peak, or Knight. Subcommittee Chairman Peak, tell us about House Bill 271, please, sir, and you can do from your seat there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 271 addresses one of the major industries in our state, which is the manufacturing industry. In the last year alone, the manufacturing industry has lost 34,000 jobs, good, well-paying jobs in our state. And your first reaction is to think, well, maybe a lot of these jobs are going overseas, other countries, but actually those jobs are, in many cases, going to our neighboring states. And the reason being is because Georgia is the only state in the southeast that does not exempt energy from sales tax. Energy in the manufacturing segment is sometimes the largest cost next to labor, and so it makes up a huge component of the cost of a product. Every other state in the southeast exempts sales tax, exempts energy from sales tax collection, except Georgia. So this bill, what it does, it phases out the sales tax on energy in manufacturing plants over a 5-year period beginning in 2011, so that the fiscal impact would not be so significant, and hopefully would also not be a drain on the Treasury until hopefully we would see a turn in the economy in 2011. This is exact bill, other than the time frame that Jeff Lewis brought forward last year and was passed through subcommittee to the full committee, and I would look forward to discussing it in subcommittee. So.
Any questions for the author of this legislation? I don't see any. We're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. Chairman Scott, Parsons, or Knight. Any of those gentlemen can set up a hearing for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cox, are you with us? Going once, twice. Representative Geisinger, are you here? I didn't see you behind the post, sir. Tell us about House Bill 292, if you would, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 292 ensures that any business or nonprofit organization that conducts a lawful promotion for the sale of its goods or to further the purpose of the organization can only give away non-cash prizes, thereby protecting the Georgia Lottery and not competing with its cash awards. Furthermore, the bill specifically provides that a person, if they wish, can enter such promotion or contest for free without paying or buying anything to enter, and will be eligible to win as those who pay or purchase to enter. These types of promotions are commonplace in our state today. But due to a recent federal appellate court case, without passage of this bill, companies and nonprofit organizations would be considered in violation of the law. The regulation fees in the bill and the registration fees in the bill and the sales tax on the non-cash prizes are estimated to run $36 million each year. This bill has no effect on the law that's governed by the Georgia Lottery, and the not-for-profit bingo or raffles or bona fide coin-operated machines that exist today. Many charitable organizations have contacted me about how they have a need for this and how helpful this bill would be to their fundraising activities. Such organizations as the American Heart Association, the VFW, the American Legion, and the Major League Baseball Players Association, to name just a few. Mr. Chairman, I ask for your favorable consideration in passing this on to a subcommittee.
We thank you for that. Would you gentlemen yield to a question or two?
Yes, sir.
The vice chair of this committee, Mr. Representative Sims.
Representative Geisinger.
Yes, sir.
On this promotional, are you saying that the charitable organization is going to now have to pay the sales tax on the gift that they would receive in order to give away in, say, a raffle? Is that what you're saying?
Well, generally what they would give is a debit card that would have the sales tax taken out of it.
Further question, if you don't mind.
Please.
My question is, like in South Georgia, we have our Lions Club I belong to. Each year has a big buck contest, and merchants all over give rifles, camping equipment, tents, anything, just anything and everything as far as hunting and fishing is concerned, as a gift to the Lions Club. And then, of course, people buy the raffle ticket, and in turn, if their number's picked, they win that item that night. It's a huge event, raises several $1,000s each year for Camp for the Blind and for eyeglass purchases down in South Georgia. Are you saying that the raffle ticket, now we're going to have to pay a sales tax on the raffle ticket itself? Is that what you're saying?
No. No.
No. Okay.
Thank you.
That was a fine soliloquy, though.
Right.
Thank you, Representative Geisinger. We're going to assign that to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee, and that would be chairs Chuck Martin, Tom Rice, or David Knight. Look forward to hearing further from you on that bill. Representative Lindsay, I apologize. When I was kidding you earlier, I really didn't know you had something else. I would have called on you a little bit later.
I thought you were just going to punish me for talking.
No, sir, I didn't. I didn't mean that at all, honestly. Tell us about House Bill 293, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of the rare situations where all the various entities involved invite regulation. We've got a little bit of a Wild West situation here dealing with some of these coin-operated machines in particular convenience stores and like places, and that there's some ambiguity in the law regarding what is and is not permitted, and has led to different levels of enforcement around the state. And so what we're trying to do is get We've got the folks who own the machines, the folks who are having the machines placed into their place of business, and we're also talking to the DAs and the Revenue Department to try to come up with a consistent policy statewide in how to deal with these coin-operated machines in the stores in terms of the licensing, both by the companies that own the machines and also licensing by the convenience stores in like places, and putting some restrictions on it to make sure that we just don't turn these into gaming situations. This, like I said, it is a bill that's supported by the industry representatives who represent the convenience stores and other stores who would be taking the machines. It's supported by the folks that own the machines, and we are working very closely with the Department of Revenue and DAs to make sure it's something consistent. What's good about, in addition, what's good about it for those of you who don't care one way or the other about these machines is that this is also a source of additional revenue for the state that both sides would gladly pay if they could have some consistency. The total additions to the state revenue coffers could be as high as $120 to $150 million, according to industry analysis.
Would the gentleman yield for a question or two?
Yes, sir.
We have someone on this committee with 40 years of law enforcement experience and an obligation of oversight in that regard. Representative Talton?
Yes, sir.
It seemed like you've been appealing to my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is a good piece of legislation,
Thank
and
you,
I
sir.
support it. As a matter of fact, I had something proposed on the same level.
Yes, sir.
My point was the safety deal.
Yes, sir.
Public safety, because a lot of these people who own these stores and things are setting themselves up for a lot of robberies and things, and there's a lot of money that's being confiscated, and just like you're saying.
Yes, sir.
My proposal was to turn it over to the lottery. What was your views on that?
Well,
And
we're
matter of
going
fact,
to,
I had, excuse me, matter of fact, I had
Yeah.
talked with the lottery people about combining this with the lottery.
I guess as a general rule, if it can be done by private enterprise, it ought to be done by private enterprise rather than by the lottery. The state will be receiving a substantial amount of revenue from this, as I've indicated before, and I would prefer to see us go that way. The lottery is a great system and is doing wonderful things, and I'm not sure if this necessarily adds to what they do.
Thank you very much for bringing it up. And
Thank you, sir.
Representative Knight?
Yes, Representative Lindsay, I haven't had time to read through the whole
Yes, sir.
bill, but I had a instance, I guess last year with back in Griffin with, I guess, the illegal gambling machines, the poker machines.
Yeah, those will still be prohibited.
They're prohibited.
Yeah, yeah. These have to be games of skill. They can't be games of chance, like poker games, like the electronic poker stuff.
Okay.
Those would still be banned.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. You've had a long day, Representative Lindsay. You might want to go somewhere and find a comfortable, warm place to sit. We're going to assign that to our Public Finance
Thank
and
you, Mr.
Policy
Chairman.
Subcommittee, and chairs Martin, Rice, or Knight. Any of those can arrange a hearing
Thank
for
you.
you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate the committee's indulgence. Thank you.
Representative Holt with us? Is Representative Holt in the room? Representative Levitas, what an honor it is to have you back with the committee. Please, sir, tell us about your House Resolution 179, if you would, please, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I didn't know better, I think you were holding me to the end, but maybe it's part of saving the best for last.
Might have been.
What actually happened, Mr. Chairman, is I was so touched by the remarks that Chairman Martin made that I went out and, in the interim, had a bill drafted that addresses the very concern that he raised. I bring before you House Resolution 179, which is included as part of the BEST plan, which is also pending before this committee, H.R. 2. This, however, draws out just the appeals process, and this, as Representative Lindsay accurately states, and I'm sure everyone on this committee knows, the appeals process for tax property purposes is a source of constant frustration for our constituents. And what this does, it essentially eliminates the current system and replaces it with competing fair market values. And what I mean by that is whether it's H.R. 1, H.R. 2, or any other bill that passes, this would provide a fair market value for determining what the accurate values of properties are. In the event that there is evaluation needed, for example, if the county provided you a tax bill, if the taxpayer were to disagree with that valuation, they could, within 45 days, go to the fair market value through an appraiser who is trained in that particular class of property and get an independent assessment. The county can either agree with that assessment, or if it disagrees, can get its own assessor, its own appraisal at a fair market value. If that value difference between the two is 20% or less, the taxpayer wins, and that's the end of it. If, however, the value is greater than 20%, then it goes to a baseball arbitration. A third-party appraiser is picked. They pick which is the fair value, and that becomes the value. That's the end of it. This eliminates the tedious and pointless process of going to appeal to the very people that have given you the tax bill, then to the Board of Equalization, and worst of all, having to file a claim in Superior Court. Subsection D of the bill addresses a specific concern that Chairman Martin raised, which is it allows the taxpayer at any time to seek a revaluation, reappraisal of their property, and the method starts all over again. Therefore, you're not stuck with just what the county says your home is worth. And unless there's questions, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
I don't see any, and that'd be interesting concepts for debate. We're going to assign House Resolution 179 to our ad valorem tax subcommittee. That would be Chairs Roberts, Graves, or Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Levitas. Thanks for your patience. Okay, we actually have some bills for final consideration by the committee today. If you are ready, Chairman Stevens, you're recognized to present House Bill 116, please, sir. What number? There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is House Bill 116 is an exemption for sales and use taxes for airplane parts used in repair. This exemption strictly for the reason we're bringing the bill forward, of course, is it has a sunset which is coming due. This exemption has several benefactors in the state of Georgia, not to mention Gulfstream and Savannah, but also Standard Aero in Augusta, Hawker Beechcraft, Epps Aviation in Atlanta, and several others, including small businesses. It's real important for people to understand that this is not a tax break for any of these companies because the sales taxes are passed through to the customers that pay their repair bill. This bill is about helping Georgia companies offer competitive pricing that is competitive with the pricings offered by out-of-state companies. And that's an especially important consideration when planes are by definition portable. You can pick them up and fly them anywhere you want to get them repaired. There's some real specific reasons for this bill, and they're very limited. First of all, commercial airliners like Delta and AirTran already enjoy this exemption. Secondly, government work like those done in Lockheed Martin already are exempt. Third, and probably most important, the flyaway clause means this bill only applies to out-of-state planes, so that the planes based in Georgia will still, ladies and gentlemen, pay the Georgia state sales and use tax for repairs, even if this bill passes. Finally, an unfriendly tax structure drives away repair business so that the sales tax revenue is never realized anyway. And I might point out, Mr. Chairman, that 2 years ago we had our own chairman of our commission and from the city of Savannah come up and lobby for this bill. When you look at the fiscal note, that's pretty substantial for the local government, to take the hit because they understand that property tax for the 1,100 additional employees that were added 2 years ago, that sales tax by these very employees, and even our own state income tax is directly related to this particular bill. And, Mr. Chairman, I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we do have Representative Beasley Teague.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He answered my question. He talked about the bill 2 years ago.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. 26. Representative Powell.
I'll speak into the microphone, Mr. Chairman, but I do believe Mr. Stevens could hear me from here. My understanding is that this does not apply to aircraft that are based in Georgia?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any information on whether those aircraft are being repaired at facilities other than Georgia, and perhaps Georgia may be losing jobs because of that provision?
Don't know if we have any of that information at all. We know it was a concern whenever 2 years ago, whenever the state of Georgia entered into an agreement with Gulfstream to expand and add an additional 1,100 employees, because that was one of the concerns that they brought up. And I might add, Mr. Chairman, that and I brought this up in subcommittee, and you know, you really like to fulfill your obligations, but there were 3 different departments that negotiated that deal for Gulfstream, and at that particular time, and I know this is a long answer to the question, at that particular time, the Department of Transportation made an obligation, which to this date has not been done, and also the Department of Adult Education made a commitment that has not been completed. So this strictly is a bill that was of concern to Gulfstream, and at that time on where they were going to locate this particular facility with this 1,100 employees. So I didn't question it at the time.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. 17, is that Representative Chairman Rice?
My good friend, Chairman Stevens, thank you for the bill. I mean, this is another one of the tax exemption, sales tax exemption bills that we've passed a whole bunch of, and you know, I guess what I'm asking for is a view that says if we're going to continue to expend upwards of what, $12 million a year in terms of the revenue impact of this. It would have been good from the 2007-2008 time frame to have some sort of a cost-benefit analysis, which I think you've attempted to explain in a literal fashion, but in terms of the actual value, are you saying that there's that the value comes to the state in maintaining the fact that Gulfstream is
Yes, I am.
In the state? In other words, they have told us that if we did not do this, they'd leave the state?
They did not. That was part of the conversations with the state. That was not part of the negotiating package. But as part of the deal to make them more competitive with other states like New York and Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Alaska, Delaware, Montana, and others, whenever they were planning to put this $300 million in Savannah and the 1,100 jobs, that was part of the conversation. And by the way, they have facilities in other states.
And so the continuation of the tax credit is part of the deal?
The continuation was part of the conversation, but it was not part of the deal.
Thank you.
Could you run over all those states again, maybe for no, really?
I can do it slower.
Chair recognizes one of the finest accounting minds in the whole world, Representative Peake.
I didn't know who you were talking about, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Stevens, I want to speak in support of this bill and the real-world application of what's happening here. I was fortunate enough to open a little business over in Pooler, which is right across the interstate from Gulfstream, and I can tell you that by us providing incentives to make sure that Gulfstream stays there, that the state and local communities benefit from the money that is spent by employees that are there in restaurants and in other businesses throughout that area. So I applaud you for doing this. Thank you for doing it, and speak in support that it does have impact throughout the rest of the community. So.
And from personal experience, Mr. Chairman, it's standing room only with Gulfstream employees in there, might I?
Are you trying to tell us you might have a conflict on the vote here?
There is a potential that I have a big conflict.
There's a section that you can abstain from the vote if you so desire, please. I don't see any other questions. Is there any discussion on the bill from any members of the committee? I see no desire to discuss. Then what's the will of the committee? I have a motion do pass by Chairman Sims and a second by Representative Glanton, I believe it was, or Stevens, maybe, excuse me, Representative Stevens, from Savannah, I might add. That's good. And now, is there any other discussion? Would you like to, you sure? Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. They beat you to it, and they're from there, too, so they probably did. Okay. No further discussion. All in favor of the motion do pass, signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. We shall report that to the Rules Committee as having passed unanimously. Thank you, Chairman Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving right along, we have with us the distinguished chair of our Natural Resources Committee, a champion of water stability in our state and also of the sales tax holiday. Chair recognizes Chairman Smith to present to the committee House Bill 120. Please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And maybe I can say he who is last shall be first. And I know all of y'all have been here for over an hour, so thank you for hearing me. This is House Bill 120, and when I presented the bill to the subcommittee, I received the fiscal note at that time. And upon review of the fiscal note later, I had a question about your water efficient products. And so there should be a substitute bill now before you, LC 188022S. And to clarify that from the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, before I make my presentation, the word water efficient products was added at the end of line 5 in the caption. It was always in the body of the bill, but it needed to be added there, and that's your difference from the subcommittee to this full committee. It's a technical change, and I'm glad it was caught. Confusion came from the fact that for several years this committee has reviewed this proposition every year because of the sunset provision in the bill. Last year our General Assembly passed a reservoir bill, Senate Bill 342, and in that reservoir bill was some language for water efficient products. So that was part of this October Energy Star water efficient products holiday, which is what was discussed, but it was confusing. And so now it's all in this bill because it's all in the exact same code section. It's listed right there. So in other words, this little tumbleweed keeps gathering a little bit more stuff as it rolls along. But all these measures are very good for the members who are new to this committee. If I could take just a minute to give you some history on this. In 2003, the General Assembly passed for the first time the school tax holiday. And one of the impetuses for that was the fact that our border states were giving school tax holidays. A few years later, in 2005, I had House Bill 559, which was for energy efficient products. That was my first year as chair of Natural Resources, and I thought it important. I didn't really foresee down the road how important these energy efficient products were, but I thought it was a good statement for our state to make. In 2006, both of those initiatives were combined. And then in this year, 2009, we had picked up the Water Efficient Products Initiative as well. Now, what is this? Your school supplies have very limited definitions, and they will be listed in previous legislation, or you can find it in the code section if you talk to Legislative Counsel. When you look at the bill, RUC are date changes. And so if I can take just a second to tell you some of the school supplies that you get a tax break on, and that date in your bill shows you that it's from July 30th to August 2nd, 2009. School supplies up to $20 per item, $100 or less for clothing and footwear, $1,500 or less for personal computers and equipment. In energy, it's $1,500 or less for energy efficient products per product for non-commercial and personal use. This was directed directly to the consumer. Your Energy Star labels, for example, are dishwashers, washing machines, air conditioners, ceiling fans, fluorescent light bulbs, dehumidifiers, programmable thermostats, refrigerators. Those fall into those categories. And then we picked up water efficient. We had that combined with the energy holiday in 2008. For several years with the fiscal notes running, in 2008, the impact on all of this to the Georgia economy was $21.07 million. 2009, it's $23.12 million. The Energy Star Water Efficient Product Holiday is October the 1st through October the 4th. The reason those two dates are separated is because at one point they were combined, and when they were combined, there was a less use of either product during those holidays, and so the goals of helping the consumer were not achieved as they had been in previous times. So now what we've done, we have it in the same code section in the same bill, but we have separate holidays. The other reason you need to know is in October, there is a national campaign for the Energy Star label. This is through the U.S. EPA, and they also partnered with the Department of Energy to start educating the consumers on the efficiency of Energy Star appliances. The reason the sales tax holiday is a needed incentive is because they right now are more expensive. Eventually, the volume is going to make it equal to the other market products, but this is why you have an incentive for energy efficient products. We all know how important it is now to have our water efficient products. We are pulling out of a drought. We're not out of it yet, but the state of Georgia has taken some positions that we are going to be water and energy efficient, and I think that's a good message to keep sending out there. Now, why in this difficult economic time would we be contemplating doing something such as this? When we listen to our national news, when we have our hear our local news, one of the messages you keep hearing is we need to stimulate the economy. We need to get the consumer out there. So this is the first thing that this does. This is a stimulation to our economy, even though there is a revenue loss, slight revenue loss to the state. Your citizens, your average citizens, your parents, your home buyers, have come to expect this for several years, and so it also so you have that in anticipation of this holiday, and it's something that people save for and plan for. Another area to think about is that we've had conversations, several conversations about manufacturing and industry and today, but just keep in mind your retailers are a huge business in Georgia, and it is a stimulation and impetus for them as well. Also, we compete with our bordering states, and this keeps that playing field equal. I think we've also been complimented. I believe someone told me that the state of Alabama has also copied this legislation word for word. So it's all about parity in that instance. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report, and everybody seems to be awake.
I just hope they're still going to vote for it. Just kidding. That was a wonderful presentation. Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment. Isn't it true that when consumers visit our stores and purchase these tax-free energy items, that they usually do some more shopping and buy things that are not on the tax-free list as well, which continues to boost our economy?
That's correct, and this is the time when we definitely need to be sending that message that our state is behind our retailers and our citizens.
Thank you, Representative Glanton. That was a very pertinent point there.
A good neighbor.
Yes. Other questions? Yes. Mr. Powell, Representative Powell.
Chairman Smith, I heard from somewhere, and it may have been in a discussion with you, that there was a problem at one point in time about calculators that are used by students in some high school specialty math, science classes that had been denied the exemption. Has that been resolved, or was that an issue?
Representative, thank you for your question, first of all. And I will tell you this. I forgot to tell you the battle. Every year I get asked, and several legislators introduce legislation adding items to this legislation. The calculators they're talking about are your advanced calculators for your advanced students in high school and college. And they are much more expensive than almost the freebie calculators you can hold in your hand. There are several other items that would have merit as well if we took our discussion in that direction. But when I'm asked the question, is there ever any opposition to the bill, I will tell you, if anything, it's like almost like a debate, but it's with the Department of Revenue. And it is their job to look at the numbers and the impact. And in order to carry this bill forward this year, I've been asked to keep it as it is. It's not to say that that item and several other items aren't worthy. There are several more energy efficient products on the market now, but this has proved stable and has made the cut, and not lessening the need for other products, and maybe we can do that in the future, but for right now, if it can just stay as it is. I appreciate your question, though.
I don't see any questions. Does any member of the committee wish to be heard on this legislation? I don't see that. What's the pleasure then of the committee? I have a motion from Chairman Scott, Martin Scott, and a second from Representative Talton that I heard for sure. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion do pass. Please signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. We shall report that to our Rules Committee. And great job, Chairman Smith, as usual.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you.
It's a great honor to call upon one of our newest members, and since you are a freshman legislator, Representative Austin, and you already are handling some very, very important legislation, I'm going to ask that you come to the podium where we can get the full value of your presentation. And you are recognized, please, sir, to tell this committee about House Bill 181.
I'd rather talk. No, I could talk about zoology, but I won't this
time.
We'll
let him respond to that later.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's my honor to bring before you House Bill 181 for your consideration. House Bill 181, let me catch you up to speed on it, is a bill that deals with unclaimed local sales taxes that have been remitted to the Department of Revenue. These unclaimed and unidentifiable sales taxes have no mechanism of being remitted back to the local governments from which they came. It presents quite a problem. I'll also let you know that in 1998 the General Assembly passed a bill that set in place a mechanism to allow these unidentifiable local sales taxes to be remitted back to local governments on a pro rata basis. It did have a sunset date on it, and that sunset date was in 2007. This bill simply removes that sunset date and allows us to utilize a mechanism that worked very well in a fair and equitably distributing local sales taxes back to local governments in a day and time where local governments are hurting as much as we are here at the state. They need some relief. This is going to be an opportunity to provide some relief on taxes that are due them. Yesterday, the Department of Revenue did testify in the subcommittee meeting that the reason for them these taxes being unidentifiable range from forms filled out wrong, no forms submitted with a check, businesses that have gone out of business, et cetera, and so forth. And so right now the state is sitting on a pool of about $18 million that needs to come back to local governments. This is a fair and equitable way to redistribute those funds or distribute those funds to the local governments, and I'll ask for your favorable consideration of the bill.
Gosh, is there a short in the system? Does every member of the committee have a question? I guess I'm just going to have to take them one by one.
Mr. Chairman, I would expect you to allow them all to ask questions, and I imagine that the discussion and the questions will be as vigorous as they were yesterday in this process.
Well, the House is only open till 5, and maybe if we bring in a pillow and a blanket, we'll finish here. We'll start.
We'll stay awake. We can. I'll keep you awake.
Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question. You said that you'd remove the sunset. Did you remove the sunset, or you just moved it to another date? Did you remove it or moved it to another date?
Actually, yesterday we did make in committee. We made the adjustment to that, and what you have before you is a substitute to the original bill that was presented. And what it does is move that date from December 31st, 2007 to 2011.
Thank you.
Representative Sims, Chairman.
I just wondering how this affects my mama.
Your mama, if you don't pass it, is going to be angry with you because she's not going to get the sales taxes to the local governments, which is going to cause her taxes to be increased, sir.
It's not good to talk down to Vice Chairman.
Sorry, sir. Are we having fun yet?
You're going to get that zoology question again if you're not careful. Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand now. It's a simple date change, but with that explanation, you may be second only to Chairman Willard.
I'll let you explain that to me later.
Taking a lot of time to do something very simple.
I think you may have gotten the best of that one, Representative Austin. Okay, I really don't see any other questions, and that was an outstanding presentation. Are there any members of the committee that wish to be heard on this matter? I don't see anybody that that does. Well, yeah, I do. I would recommend recognize Representative Talton for the purpose of making a motion.
This time I'd like to make a motion that we do pass.
We have a motion do pass. Do I hear a second? I have a second and a motion do pass. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee.
It passes unanimously, your first bill, and it will be in the Rules Committee. Great job. I shall yield the chair and the last bill today. I hope I can get recognized for it.
He always worries when he has to relinquish the chair. If you will, Mr. Chairman, go ahead and present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now wish I'd been a little nicer to you. I didn't keep up with the timing of things here today. I bring before the committee House Bill 212. I'm actually bringing this on behalf of Speaker Pro Tem Burkhalter, Leader Keene, and myself as the signers. This is the jet fuel partial exemption bill. I don't think it's any secret to anybody that lives in the entire southeastern United States, for that matter, the world. What a wonderful airport we have here in the Atlanta area, and how much it means to our commerce and our economy in general. First or second busiest in the country. I'm not sure which. I've heard both statistics. And we are very fortunate to have some airlines here that call this place home. And that is even more special to the area. Frankly, there are several hubs that they could go to in several other states and different counties and get complete tax-free treatment. The jobs and the economic impact that they bring warrants them being asked to move literally daily. And this was something we did years back for some of the wonderful folks that are headquartered here and fly hundreds of thousands of miles in and out of the Atlanta area and environs in our state, to give them some relief from some pretty onerous sales tax on jet fuel. And you all may or may not know jet fuel is very, very expensive, a lot more than gasoline and so forth. And all this bill is an extension of the sunset that we put on that. I don't know, it's 12 or 13,000 full-time jobs with just Delta Airlines alone. Incredible corporate partner for this area and headquartered here. So that's what I'm asking you all to consider. I'll be happy to yield any questions, which would be the extension of the and it's only a partial exemption. It does not even entirely exempt the jet fuel from both state sales tax and partial local sales tax, but not totally.
Gentlemen, yield to number 18.
Just like at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, to make a motion for due pass.
Okay, that's not quite ready yet.
Okay.
25.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that number closer to 25,000?
Could be. I was just talking about in this general neighborhood right here. Or plus 2 with Harold and Dolores that we got over there.
I don't see any further questions. I'll recognize Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion do pass House Bill 212, LC 187931.
We have a motion do pass. Do I have a second? We have a second. All in favor of the bill say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The bill is passed. Moved on to rules. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Certainly may adjourn the committee if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We stand adjourned. Thank you.